Hey folks, welcome back. Time for a review of one of my favorite modules for Starfleet battles in recent years, and that is Captain's Module C6, Lost Empires. This is part of the very excellent C module series. Now, you'll recall in my introductory video for SFB, I recommended C1, C2, and C3 as kind of part of the core game, if you like. The other C modules they all expand the game significantly beyond that scope. I've also talked about C4 in a previous video, which is all about simulator empires, and C6 is about extending some empires that appear in the SFU history before the General War timeline, but were wiped out. So you will find these guys. These are the Carnivons up here and the Paravians down here. You will find them in the early years modules, the Y series. However, players got to like these races and their new weapons in those modules, and people started to ask, well, what if we could play these guys in an alternate future where they survived and they modernized their tech and took part in the General War? And so that's what Module C6 is all about. Basically, it updates those the little tidbits about these two races that we got in previous products, updates them all the way to the General War level of tech, with tons of new ships for both sides. So 55 new ships of every type and class for both empires. The Carnivons get 11 fighters, 4 bombers, 16 gunboats. Paravians likewise get 9 fighters, 4 bombers, and 15 gunboats. Then you get rules for new weapons for both races, and 140 counters for each, and a total of 10 scenarios. So you can see it's a really thick product as well. Tons of content in here. Really good value, lots of fun stuff, so let's get into it. I also managed to get this on sale from Leisure Games a few years ago for £10, so it's an absolute bargain. But I think even if you get it new, it'll be around 20 or so it's really highly affordable for a ton of content. And I mean, look at the size of the rulebook. Now, don't be scared off by this, because as per usual, most of the actual rules content is pretty small. If we look at the table of contents here, so basically, the ship descriptions start on page 19, and we have designer's notes in the beginning. So really, there's only about 16, 17 pages of rules, which sounds like a lot for a normal game, but for SFB, that's really not very much. And basically, you get 2 new weapons for the Carnivons, plus a new seeking weapon, and then you have 1 new weapon for the Paravians, which is also a seeking weapon. So we'll go into those a little bit, and then I'll show you the counters and then some of the ships. So first of all, for the Carnivons, we have the Disruptor Cannon. This is a very simple one to understand conceptually. So a Disruptor, you can fire it every turn, you can overload it. The Disruptor Cannon is a 2-turn arming version of the Disruptor. So it costs twice as much power to use and fires half as much as every other turn, but when it hits, it does twice as much damage, and that's it. It doesn't sound that interesting, but the 2-turn arming element means that you have to balance your firing and your when you turn in for an attack and turn away to reload in a completely different way from a regular disruptor armed ship. So it does change up your tactics significantly, and they do pack quite a punch if you manage to overload a couple of them and get some strong hits. And that's really it. So the Disruptor Cannon is a different way of using a disruptor type weapon. You can see from the damage table here, they work just the same as disruptors. Basically, you can overload them, but only out to range 8, and they have a different 2-hit roll depending on which type of firing you're doing. So you can fire overloaded disruptor cannons at range 0, but you can't do that for standard. And then the 2-hit numbers pretty much line up, but then beyond 8 hexes, you can only fire standard shots, which will do 8 damage, but they fade out over distance as well. So really cool weapon, very simple to understand, quick to get into. But the really cool addition for the Carnivons is the wonderful heel nipper, which is apparently properly called the warp field interruption device. And basically, this is a really cool little idea. It's tough to use effectively, but it can be devastating. And the basic idea is that with the heel nipper, you choose which warp engine on the opponent ship you're targeting. Then you fire, and you will have to roll a 2-hit roll. Where is the table? Maybe that's over here. So it's got a pretty short range, but you can spend 1 power for a short range shot up to 3 hexes away, or spend 2 power for an extended shot. If you hit, the ship will be will have to cancel its next hex of movement, so it'll get held back, and it'll do an involuntary turn in the direction of whichever engine you hit. So if you hit the left warp engine, for example, then it'll involuntarily turn 60 degrees to the left. And this is really a great thing because the Carnivons also use these big hefty missiles called death bolts, which I'll talk about in a moment. And you can use the things like the heel nipper to basically force your opponent to eat a bunch of damage when they can't evade the way they had hoped to. However, because they only work up close, they don't do much in the way of damage. They're more about interrupting opponents' movements. They are a sort of specialty weapon. They take skill to use. And I think they are really fun and really thematic. The Carnivons are a race of space dogs. So them nipping you in the heel and herding you into their swarm of missiles is pretty cool. So that's the heel nipper, a really great addition to the game, in my opinion. Then we have the death bolt. So these are the specialized missiles, or drones rather, for the Carnivons. Basically, they are drones, but they are bigger. So they have, I think the base amount of damage they can take is 10 points. So a typical drone will blow up after taking 4 points of damage, whereas a death bolt will take 10 points of damage. They also have a larger warhead, so you can see that the default death bolt has a speed of 12, a warhead of 30 points, which you can modify, an endurance of 3 turns, and require 10 damage points, which can also be modified to destroy. Death bolts are the same size as Type 1 drones, but cannot be substituted for Type 1 drones. And what makes them kind of unique is that they require deck crew actions from your Carnavan ship to fire. And if you optimize those actions, you can get a somewhat faster firing rate. Like you can just about get 2 of these out per turn. So they're really cool in that they are significantly bigger and tougher. What's also interesting is they have a different targeting system. So you can use basically leading or following targeting. So you can have the death bolt following your opponent in the typical way of any seeking weapon, or you can declare that it's leading the opponent or that it's following the opponent. And depending on which of those happens when it impacts the opponent, you will be able to choose a different shield for that death bolt to hit on, which again allows for additional threat from these things. Your opponent really doesn't want these to hit because you do have this flexibility about where they are going to target and which shields they will impact. So you see you have 3 options here: lead, normal, or follow the target. So that's another aspect that makes them very different tactically from normal drones. So the weapon can be customized as well, so you can give it anti-tractor points to make it harder for your opponent to hold it in a tractor beam. You can have it expend its energy in a directed burst. You can have it mounted with extra electronic countermeasures. You can give it armor, so it's tougher. You can give it a Spitfire modification, so it will fire up to 6 anti-drone shots at any legal anti-drone target. So there's really a lot of cool things that you can do to your death bolts as well. So it gives a unique flavor to the seeking weapon combat for these guys. Now the Paravians, they just have one new weapon, which is fairly straightforward to understand, but very interesting in practice, and that's the quantum wave torpedo. So these are kind of a cross between a plasma torpedo and the ISC's plasmatic pulsar device, in that they travel on the board like a seeking weapon, but they impact with a bit of splash damage, as the PPD does. They can also be overloaded, which is pretty cool. So 2 points of power are required to arm the torpedo, and each launcher can fire every single turn. So that's pretty awesome as well. And the Paravian ships tend to have a lot of quantum wave torpedo launchers, so they tend to put a lot of these on the board. So let's see, here's the firing table, right? So similar to a plasma, the more hexes it travels, the lesser the damage will be. And the base damage is not very impressive. From hexes 0 to 7, it's just 7 damage. But it has the splash effect, so you have a central element of 5 damage and 1 damage to the shields on either side of the shield of impact. But you can also overload it, and then it becomes 1, 10, and 1 instead of 1, 5, and 1, and so on down the line. But the overloads will fade out after hex 14. But it does give you a longer range to have this overloaded effect than, for example, disruptors or photons, which is pretty cool. So they're really neat and interesting weapon, and they really behave quite differently from standard torpedoes. They give you lots of options with overloads, and the fact that they can fire every turn as well. The way they take damage, so they can be damaged by phasers, asteroids, or space dust. But basically, if you do 6 points of phaser damage to the torpedo, then it will only remove the 2 points of splash damage. You'd have to do another 11 points, so a total of 17 points, to eliminate the torpedo altogether. So that really makes them a substantial annoyance on the board, because they may not do a heck of a lot of damage, but there are going to be a lot of them. And you can't really feasibly eliminate a lot of them from the board with phaser damage, because the initial 6 points are just going to get rid of the splash element, and the main damage element will still be there. And 17 points of phaser is quite a bit of commitment of your weapons to remove them from the board. So yeah, they're a really cool and interesting weapon. And I think they're probably one of the stronger heavy weapons in actual fact. And there's a handy list here of differences from plasma torpedoes. So there's no pseudos. They have 3 points of ECM, not electronic countermeasures or electronic countermeasures like plasma, all that kind of stuff. So they're pretty straightforward to understand, but really interesting in play. So there's 4 new weapons in total. 3 of them are for the Carnivons, and it feels like the Paravians get shortchanged a little bit, but the Quantum Wave is really, really fun to use. So it doesn't feel that they've been shortchanged in effect at all. Then we have our very extensive ship descriptions, details on how to use all the many, many ships in this product. Then you have your scenarios and your annexes and charts at the end. So there we go. Now we have our counters. We have 280 counters in total, 140 for each race. The red guys are the Paravians, the space birds, and you can see their ships kind of reflect their biology. And we go all the way from the big battleship up here in the corner, and the stellar domination ship, battleship carrier, and so forth, all the way down to frigates, then fast patrol ships, fighters, and bombers as well. We have a number of quantum wave torpedo counters, including ones for multiple, and we have our shuttles, of course, as well. So a really complete selection, a complete fleet. You could play a full campaign with these guys, and the same is the case for the Carnivons, right? You can see here as well, we've got battleship carrier, stellar domination ship, dreadnought, heavy battle cruiser, all kinds of great big guys. Then we've got cruisers, destroyers, frigates, PFs, shuttles, fighters, bombers. And then we've got our death bolt counters, which is handy, and a death bolt swarms as well. So I would say the Carnavan ships in 2D don't look as exciting as the Paravians, but at least they're very recognizable. And the color is attractive. I like this kind of deep emerald green. It looks really nice. So a great set of counters done in the modern style with, full color ship diagrams on them. And with 280 counters to the sheet instead of 216 like in the older products. This product came out in 2013, by the way. So it's one of the more recent modules for Starfleet battles. Now, finally, let's look at some SSDs. So, again, we have complete coverage for these empires from big to small. You can see a huge list of cool stuff for both empires. The book starts with the Paravians, and the latter half is for the Carnivons. So let's just start with, who do we have up first? The Paravian battleship. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it's a big boy. 290 points, so it's actually a little bit less than some of the battleships for other General War species. But it does have a whole bunch of fighters as well, which will add to that number. And you'll see that it has 8 quantum wave torpedo launchers in the front arc there, which is quite a few. And then a whole bunch of phaser 1s to the side, along with some phaser 3s for more passive defense. So it's a really beefy battleship in practice, since you've got these fighters helping you out, and they also have, of course, quantum wave torpedo charges on them as well. And we've got the Thunder Crane fighter and the Thunder Crane E, which has electronic warfare pods. So yeah, I mean, it's again not too difficult to start just jumping in and flying these. Once you understand the QWT rules, that's all you need. Everything else is pretty straightforward for the Paravians, and that just the presence of that new weapon will give you a lot of interesting new tactics to explore. Now, the battleship, despite being enormous, has a turn mode D, which is actually not that bad compared to battleships. I think the Tholian battleship turn mode is E, and the Tholians are usually quite agile. So having a battleship with a D is actually pretty good. Then, of course, we have some battleship variants like the Stellar Domination ship, which will have 12 fighters and I believe 6 PFs as well. So major armament there to carry into battle. And of course, we have a battleship carrier, which will exchange 6 of those PFs for another 12 fighters. So we get a whole wing of fighters to carry into battle here. And that correspondingly raises the point value, of course, once you add all those in. Then we have this guy, the Battleship Raid Mothership, which has a huge amount of cargo. And it says here it can carry up to 4 pods. So this is a good way to have a big muscular ship, carry a bunch of battle pods, carrier pods, whatever, into the battle as well, with all that tons of cargo space. Then we get into the more normal size stuff. We've got some dreadnoughts. The heavy dreadnought with 225 points still has 8 QWTs, by the way, the same as the battleship, which is none too shabby. We've got carriers. This is a space control ship, so that one can carry PFs as well as fighters. This one has a huge complement of 24 fighters, the heavy carrier. Then we have light dreadnoughts, space control ship, again, which can carry PFs. We've got a heavy battle cruiser. I mean, there's just every possible ship role you could want. I'm going to start skipping ahead a little bit here. We have a war cruiser PF tender, so it's a cruiser size ship but can still carry 6 PFs into battle, and it also has 2 special sensors, which is handy for scout functions. And then we have a war cruiser scout, which gets rid of the PFs and just has 4 special sensors. And we have fast war cruisers. We've got light tactical transports, so we can carry pods into battle. War destroyer, destroyer leaders, war destroyer leader. Then we've got a mobile carrier, which is a small carrier. Looks like it can pick up 8 fighters into battle, which is not too bad. Then we've got some more scouts. Let's skip ahead to... look at this. We've got a escort carrier. So this has 2 quantum torpedo launchers, 6 Thunder Crane fighters it can carry. Interesting. We have an escort frigate. That one has full Aegis. Okay. So I guess, yeah, these might be the ships you would put into your kind of small carrier group. Carrier resupply ship. We've got frigates with scout capability, mine hunters, police flagships. All just so many things to play with in here, new toys. Then we have a tug, always useful for campaign play, and the requisite pods that your tugs or your raid mothership can carry. So cargo pods, self-defense, repair pods if you need to repair ships in battle, PF tender pods to carry fast patrol ships, barracks pods for ground invasions, and a battle pod which adds some phaser ones and some quantum wave torpedoes as well. Then we have even more pods. We've got carrier pods, which carry the Thunder Crane, more PF transport pods, scout pods with special sensors. Then we have, what do we got? Heavy carrier pods and heavy fighter FCR pod. Wow, and then we have space control ship pod. So this carries fighters and PFs in a single pod, but it's enormous. So you could use that to turn your tug or your raid mothership into a real beast. Then we have some squadrons of different types of fighters. So we have the Thunderduck Assault Fighter, which is a little bit beefier, but a little bit lower speed than Thunder Crane at 14. But it has 2 torpedo charges and a bit more hit points here. Then we have some of their earlier fighters, the Thunder Finch with less survivability and a lower speed by far. Thunder Quail, Thunder Raven getting a bit faster. And the Thunder Crane seems to be the standard for the general war period, I guess. Then we have heavy fighters. So these guys have a lot of torpedo charges. These are the Thunder Swan heavy fighters, so they get 2 Phaser 2s and a Phaser 3 as well. Then we have Interceptor heavy fighters, which have more Phaser 3s. Then the Thunder Swan F Fast Heavy Fighter, which is speed 15. And the Fast Interceptor Heavy Fighter, which is also speed 15. Cool. But it has less torpedo charges in favor of more phasers, it looks like. Then we have the promised 4 different types of bombers. We've got medium bombers with a huge amount of weaponry and hit points. The Thunder Goose B, which is another medium bomber. Thunder Goose C. And then we have the Thunder Gander Heavy Bomber Squadron. Look at these monsters. Very cool. And then we should have, I'm guessing, PFs on the next couple of pages. And indeed we do. We have the Hummingbird PF Flotilla. So these guys mount 2 quantum wave torpedo launchers on each PF, which is pretty good, except for the Scout variants, which have instead special sensors, for example. And they also carry a couple of phaser ones, which is pretty nifty. Then the Hummingbird P Phaser PF Flotilla, they swap out the quantum wave torpedoes for more phaser ones. So if you just want pure phaser boats, you want to go for the Hummingbird P. Then we have the Hummingbird PF variant, so stuff like the Survey variant, which has a tractor link, special sensors. There's some lab spaces as well. Then we have Cargo variant, Ground Assault, Recovery, Workboat, Fighter Conveyor, which can carry 4 fighters on its back, and the Mine Warfare variant, of course. Then we have the Interceptors, Songbird Interceptors. So these were the predecessors to the PF, so they're a bit more fragile and a bit less effective, but they are very cheap with 15 points. How much are the Hummingbirds? I guess they are, 20 points. So for 5 less points, you get a less usable small patrol craft. Then we've got even defense satellites, ground-based quantum wave torpedo bases. So everything you could want to run this empire as a full-on campaign if you want to. And then we get into the Carnivons. My favorite, the doggies. So here's their big old battleship, which comes with 8 fighters on board as well. You can see there are 8 disruptor cannons in the front arc here, and 4 heel nippers, which could really chomp on somebody's movement and get them in the paths of those cannons. And the death bolts. We've got 4 death bolt racks. Yeah, we've got 4 big warp engines for lots of power. And what do we got here? 280 points. So similar cost to the Paravian battleship. So it should be a pretty even match in that respect. Then, of course, we have some battleship variants as well. We've got the Stellar Domination ship, which includes more fighters and a PF flotilla, and the Battleship Carrier, which has just a whole mess of fighters, which is pretty cool. Then we get, again, into the progressively smaller ship classes. So we've got the Dreadnought, which has 3 heel nippers instead of 4 on the battleship, and 6 disruptor cannons instead of 8 on the battleship, but still plenty of firepower for this guy. And a ton of Phaser 3s as well, facing to the rear to help chase off any drones coming your way. And 6 Phaser 1s to the front as well. So pretty beefy. The Heavy Dreadnought, what does this guy get? So we get another 20 points. And yeah, we got some additional Phaser 1s in the front and in the rear as well. No, same amount of Phaser 1s in the back, I think. We get 4 death bolt racks here. Yeah, so we get 2 additional death bolt racks as well, which is a pretty big deal. Yeah, so the Heavy Dreadnought does have a significant amount more firepower for the 20 points. Then we get the Space Control Ship, which is basically a Dreadnought with a PF flotilla and some fighters. And then we have the Heavy Carrier, which has many more fighters. Full fleet 24 there. Then we have Light Dreadnoughts. We get into Battle Cruisers. Survey Cruisers, a bit more of a multifunctional ship with special sensors instead of heel nippers. Let's start skipping ahead a little bit here. And now we're getting into the War Cruiser territory with the many handy variants like the War Cruiser Leaders. We've got a War Cruiser Carrier, an Escort War Cruiser with full Aegis to protect your carriers. Command War Cruiser. Bombardment Cruiser, so that one has 6 death bolt racks. Wow. And the Command War Cruiser. Then War Cruiser Minesweeper, War Cruiser PF Tender with special sensors as well. Pretty good mix of capabilities there. Then we've got the tactical transport. And what else we got? Now we're getting into more cruisers. Should be into frigates soon. Oh, no, destroyers first. Sorry about that. So the destroyers are pretty compact, 75 points for this one. And we get 2 disruptor cannons and a heel nipper at the front. And then just the 1 death bolt rack. But still got something you got to keep out for. The heavy war destroyer carries a couple of fighters with it into battle, which is kind of neat. Then, skip ahead a bit, we've got mobile carrier, a very small destroyer with a few fighters, escort war destroyers, minesweepers, then strategic transports, frigate leaders, just, I mean, endless stuff to explore in this module, really, for these 2 races. Okay, police carrier, fleet tug. And now we're getting into the pods. So again, we have a full selection of pods that can be carried around by tugs and various other craft. So we've got troop transports for attacking planets and such. We've got cargo pods, self-defense pods, which come with heel nippers and phaser 3s, it looks like. Repair pods for repairing ships in battle. Carrier pods, which come with JK4 and JK4E fighters, or these guys. HY3 fighters. And then we have battle pods, which give us disruptor cannons and phaser 1s, and a death bolt rack. Oh wow, pretty good. Then what else? Should be even more pods, I think. Yep, we've got heavy carrier pods. Can carry some beefier fighters, and more of them, in fact. Then we have scout pods with special sensors, phaser 3s, and some labs as well. Death bolt pods, which give us 1, 2, 3 death bolt racks. Wow. Then PF transport pods for fast patrol ship carriage. Then heavy fighter pods, PF tender pods, and the space control pod, which we also saw for the Paravians, and the hangar pods for administrative shuttles and advanced shuttles. Then we're going to get into, I would assume, some fighters, yes. So, as with the Paravians, we start with the old and slow and move up into the fast and good. So we have the Jackal 1 superiority fighter with only a speed of 8, and just a few hit points there. And then we have the Jackal 2, which ups the speed to 10. Then the Jackal 3. Then we have the Jackal 4, and you can see where we're going. That one has a speed of 15, which is more typical for a fighter. Then we have assault fighters here. So these guys are the Hyena 1, the Hyena 2, which has 2 heavy weapon charges, and the Hyena 3, which carries, even some more stuff. Cool. Then we have our friends, the bombers. So we've got the Dingo 1 heavy fighter, the Dingo 1 heavy interceptor fighter. Oh, sorry, these are heavy fighters, not bombers. The Dingo 2 and the Dingo 2I fast interceptor. So again, lots of mixtures of phaser 2s and phaser 3s depending on the role, and they seem to increase in hit points value here as we gain battle point value. Then we have our bombers. There we go. We've got the Bear 1 medium bomber, Bear 2, Bear 3, and the Kodiak. Wow, look at that monstrosity. 38 points for these big guys, and tons of heavy weapons, chaff, electronic warfare. Bombers, of course, can only be stationed on bases, so not generally carried out into combat. All right, then we have the PFs. First, we have an interceptor squadron here. Again, these are the predecessors to PFs, so they're generally about 15 points. We have on them disruptor cannon, 2 phaser 2s, and a phaser 3 to the rear. It doesn't look like we have any heel nippers on these guys. On the fast patrol ships, the PFs, we have disruptor cannons, phaser 2s, 2 phaser 3s to the rear. And again, no heel nippers, but we do have, of course, the scout variant. I think there will be a variant with heel nippers. Well, first we have the phaser variant, as the Paravians had, so we swap out the disruptor cannons for more for phaser 1 to the front instead. Then we have the variants, and yes, finally, a heel nipper variant. I think that would be really fun to have a swarm of Carnavan fast patrol ships with a couple of heel nippers chomping away at the back of their opponent's ships to free them up for a swarm of death bolts from their big dreadnoughts or whatever. Yeah, and then we have survey variants, cargo variants, ground assault with barracks, recovery variant, workboat variant, fighter conveyors with space for 4 fighters, and mine warfare. And then at the very end, of course, we have their defense satellites and ground-based disruptor cannons. So, wow. That was probably more than you ever really needed to see, but I wanted to give you a really good look at all the huge range of stuff you get in this product. I think it's an excellent module. I really enjoy all the new weapons. The Paravians are fun, a bit quicker off the starting block if you're new to these guys. You should start with them because they're easier to understand with just the quantum wave torpedo to worry about. But the Carnivons are my faves. They really spice up the game with this heel nipper ability to mess with enemy movement. I think that's always really interesting and fun to play with. But it's balanced out by the power requirements, the short range, and the chance to miss. So you really have to... there's a lot riding on, when and how you use the heel nipper to maximize its effectiveness. But it's a really fun weapon to use. And as you can see, you've got well over 100-page SSD book. You've got a little bit of everything for both empires. So the only thing you're missing now for the Carnivons and Paravians is things like X ships, which they may come in a future add-on module like C6R. I think there's a thread for discussing that on the BBS, on the ADB website. There may be some additional specialized variants. I noticed that in, I think, Captain's Log 49, there were area control ship SSDs for both these guys in that issue. So I bought those issues just so I could have those ships because I really like these empires. So I'm sure there'll be more stuff for them down the line, hopefully in the C6R module. I'd love to see what they get up to in the X-ship era. And there may be some more, alternate timelines for them that could be explored. Who knows? So definitely I recommend if you're into SFB and you're looking for a new challenge and you want to add some new spice to your game, and you're already kind of up to date with C1, C2, C3, then I would definitely pick this up. It'll really spice up your general war campaigns and combats. Both races are a lot of fun to play with, and I guarantee you'll find some ships you want to fly for both of them because it really is just a titanically large set of ships for not very much money. And that really is one of the key things about SFB versus Federation Commander is that SFB has that steep learning curve, but 20 pounds on a module will get you more stuff than you know what to do with. There's 120 pages of SSDs in here. I mean, there's so much to play with, and it'll last you years of fun, particularly if you get into a big drawn out campaign. So easily gets my recommendation, if you're an SFB player. PDF price, again, is a little bit higher than my taste, but if you do want the SSDs with boxes color-coded to make them easier to find systems you need to mark off, then they do have the colorized SSD books for a few bucks extra on DriveThruRPG and the other online stores that ADB uses. So maybe worth looking at that if you're really into these guys. But yeah, I definitely recommend the Dead Tree product and the nice high-quality counters and the very, very many ships that you can enjoy for years and years to come. So I hope you enjoyed that review and sort of deep dive into the product itself. If you have any more questions about it, of course, leave some comments on the video. Just ask me whatever you like. I'll try to help you out. I will be covering some more deep dive reviews of some of my favorite SFB modules in the future. If there's one in particular that you want to see, then just let me know. And if I have it, I will do that for you. In the meantime, I hope you are enjoying your games, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, take care, and bye-bye.